because you're speaking.
Yes. No, flattery will not help you in this presentation. Okay, so a little bit of biblical history. How many of you have read the Bible? Yeah, liars. Okay. So according to the Hebrew myth, Moses had a brother named Aaron, and when Moses went up to speak to a flaming bush, that was not a guy, he got these tablets. The rest of the Hebrewites, or whatever they call themselves, Israelites, were worried. And so somehow they had a bunch of gold, and they made a golden calf. And they decided this was, I don't know why God was a calf. Veal is good, but not that good. To make a calf to worship God. And Moses, does all this sweat and blood and tears, and he comes back, and instead of being grateful because he's got these heavy stone tablets, they have this golden calf. And Moses gets pissed off about it. I do swear a lot, and I apologize. If there are children here, anyone under the age of 12? Okay, we're good. There is. Oh, crap. Carlin is here. Okay, all right, I will try not to do that. So anyway, he was upset about it because, first of all, the Ten Commandments say that there shall be no other false idols, right? And also that you can't put physicality to God, even though we're made in his own image. Apparently that includes calves. Anyway, so really ticked him off. Aaron and the rest of them were in trouble, and Moses had to set them straight. So what we're going to do is we're going to play make-believe. How many of you have done that since the age of 15? I don't want to know. The faith-based initiative is going to be the golden calf, okay? And this sign, the land of make-believe, actually exists in New Jersey. Yes, it does. It is a place. We're going to pretend that religious organizations and institutions are the Israelites. I will be Moses. And I am going to bring the Word of God in the form of the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And together, we need to destroy the faith-based initiative, that money-sucking, self-congratulating program that poses as legitimate public policy. Fair enough? Good goal? All right. Okay, so first of all, a little background history. Where we stand today. In the Obama administration, we have the Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, and faith-based kind of got slurped out there. But that means that any mosque, church, synagogue may apply directly for faith-based funding from the state or federal government without a separate charitable purpose, okay? So if you're a church, and I'm going to use the word church because it rolls off the tongue more easily than synagogue or mosque for me. That's just my innate bias. But if you're a church, you do not have to have a separate charitable purpose. You do not have to have, you are a charity as far as the federal government is concerned when it comes to faith-based initiatives, and you comply for grants, for money. These organizations do not have to publicly report how they spend these funds because they are not required to file Form 990s. Now, a Form 990 is what every 501c3, which is how charitable organizations are classified, have to file at the end of every fiscal year about how they spend their money because they are public trusts. How many of you are part of a 501c3? Okay, so if you've ever done any charitable work for American Atheists, if you've ever worked with the AHA, FFRF, CFI, Americans United, pretty much any national organization in the movement except SCA is a 501c3. SCA is a 501c4, which is a lobbying organization. If you've done any local work with a charitable organization, they are all 501c3s, and they file a Form 990, and these are public record. And they tell you where their money comes from and how they spend it. And that's how organizations that monitor charities can tell you how much goes towards administration, how much goes towards salaries, how much actually, what percentage of each dollar goes towards their charitable endeavors. Make sense? Okay, churches don't have to do this, even though they are considered 501c3s. They just get to pass go, collect $200, or in this case, a lot more than $200, bypass jail, and go to the land of free money. Okay? All right. Yes, thank you. How many of you are already pissed off? Yeah, we're going to get all of you by the end of the day. Okay, so we want some programs, and so what happened is this was all because of, well, it didn't just start with George W. Bush, but I will put a lot of blame on him and his administration. But one of his famous quotes in 2004 is, "We want to fund programs that save Americans one soul at a time." Thank you so much. So what happened is there were a series of, the president can issue executive orders. And these can be undone by presidents who come after. But what the president did, George W. Bush, was pass a bunch of executive orders that changed how executive money can be spent. And executive money is all the money that goes through the departments, through the executive branch. Not Congress, but the executive branch. So the U.S. Department of Education, Health and Human Services, Energy, the State Department. All those funds go through the executive branch. And what he said was that these organizations can discriminate in how they spend these federal dollars when it goes out from the executive branch on religion. And this also includes gender and your sexual orientation. So this was a big departure, but this is where it stands right now. And we know this because the Salvation Army, and we know it's legal because the Salvation Army did that. And that's why they're up there, because it's public record that they did this, and some of their employees sued. And they went to court, and the court said that under the executive order, under the law, it's legal. So they purged many of their employees based on their religious preference. If their religious ideologies did not match with the Salvation Army, which is a church, under the law, did not match, they let them go. And if they found out you were not straight, they let you go. And it's perfectly legal for them to do so. And billions of dollars are being doled out by the states and the federal government with the sole purpose of giving the money to these faith-based organizations. So that's where we are. Now, this may hit close to home. How many of you are from Philadelphia or have ever lived here? You have your own city faith-based initiative. How many of you knew that?
No.
How many of you have ever participated in the city's faith-based office? Do you know there's a mailing list? You should be on it. You should know what they're doing with that money. We should all be on it, so we know how they're spending their money. But yep, that is what the screenshot that I took at like 12:02 last night of the City of Philadelphia's Faith-Based Initiatives program, the liaison between the Office of Mayor and Philadelphia's diverse communities of faith and their leaders. I think it should also say non-theistic. We count. But anyway, there it is. And before anyone from New Jersey feels too smug, there's the Office of Faith-Based Initiatives for New Jersey. And they actually have a specific, it's not on here, it's a little bit at the bottom, but they have something called Be in the Loop. And you can be on their mailing list. So we should all, how many of you are on the Loop mailing list? Anybody from New Jersey? There's a whole New Jersey table here. We should be on that list. We should be watching what they're doing. So, Pittsburgh has it. Allentown has one. Pennsylvania is rife with city faith-based initiatives. When I did my research for this, I've never seen a state have so many citywide ones have websites reaching out to religious communities in a state that tends to go blue. But Pennsylvania has a lot of red in it, especially in the rural areas. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to get in there and find out what they're doing in a way that isn't necessarily possible in lots of other states, where it's centralized in one area, usually the state capital. I think we have an opportunity to find out what's going on. So if anybody does, let me know. I'll give you some information how to contact me at the end. And I'm in the phone book. Okay, so quick summary of laws. How did we get here? Because it is a little complicated, and I'm an attorney, and I like to get complicated. So, Civil Rights Act of 1964 said it was unlawful for any employer to refuse to hire or to discharge an individual based on race, color, religion, or sex, or national origin. So we had that covered. But there was an exemption for church groups. And so, for example, the easy one to remember is the Catholic Church was allowed to continue to not hire women to be priests, okay? Because that was considered an essential function of the Catholic Church, was to have male priests. For pedophilia? I don't know. Anyway, because that was an essential function of the Catholic Church, they got this exemption under the Civil Rights Act. And it was to their organizational integrity. Okay, another really bad joke there. I won't go there. We have a child in the room. But you can see what I mean. It was organizational integrity. Now, this has actually gone really way askew recently. There was in 2012, there was a Supreme Court case where they ruled that even a teacher who gives Bible lessons, who is nominated by the clergy for the Bible, okay, stop. I'm trying to rush too much and it's complicated. There was a Lutheran school in, I think, Wisconsin, and I might be off by the state, but it went up to Supreme Court, and in order to have the church always nominated who the teachers should be for the attached school. and it was considered a divine thing to be a teacher for the school. The teacher had some medical problems and took time away under the Family Medical and Leave Act. During this time, they brought in a substitute teacher, also nominated by the congregation, and then decided to leave her there. When the teacher came back and said, "I'm all better," they said, "No, we don't want you anymore. Your divine right is gone." So she sued under the Family Medical and Leave Act, and also Americans with Disabilities, okay, that they shouldn't have given her job away. Because the teachers in that school were doing prayers and teaching Bible verses and some Bible education, the church claimed that they were religious teachers and that they were like ministers to the children. And the Supreme Court ruled yes. And so that meant that the church did not have to abide by federal law. So the teachers did not have the protection of the Americans with Disabilities Act. They did not have the protection of the Family Medical and Leave Act. In fact, they have, under that ruling, no protections of federal law whatsoever. And as Barry Lynn said, you could pretty much say the janitor was a minister under that, leaving no protections whatsoever for anyone who works under the auspices of a religious organization. So this has kind of gotten blown way out. Pretty much if you work for a religious organization and they deem you integral to their organization, you have no protection under federal law. Okay, so going back to the executive orders and how that works with the executive branch, FDR, who, by the way, in my genealogy research, I am his 7th cousin 2 times removed. Yeah, very cool. On his mother's side. He banned discrimination by federal contractors during World War II. What was happening is that we had these huge contracts to, for the war effort, and they were having problems getting people of color and women and also religion to be hired by certain contractors. There's a lot of bias going around. So he was the first one to say that if you have a contract from the federal government for the war effort, you cannot discriminate. Well then LBJ, who I've not discovered any genealogical links to, expanded that to any federal contract in 1965. So if you had any contract, if you were getting any money from the government for whatever purpose, you could not discriminate. And that's the way we like it, right?
Right.
If you're getting my tax money, you can't then turn around and discriminate against me in using it, or against you, or against you. And that's how it was until George W. Bush. In the 1990s, how many of you remember John Ashcroft? Fondly, yes. The man who covered up Lady Liberty because she was, or Lady Justice because she was indecent. How many of you remember Bill Clinton? Ooh. And here's why. Bill Clinton did many good things, but he also did some really bad things. And one of them was charitable choice, okay? He signed some really shitty, really bad legislation into law, and one of them was charitable choice, which was part of the Welfare Act reform, which many of us remember and think of as a really great thing. But he compromised a lot. And compromise is not a dirty word, but in this case, it really started something that has started a downslide. And what it was is, for the first time, it permitted taxpayer-financed social services by houses of worship. So because of what LBJ did in 1965, based on what FDR did, if you were a social service organization, any social service organization, you had to be a 501c3, and you couldn't be a church without a charitable purpose. So if you're Catholic Charities, you had to be a separate 501c3 from the church. If you're a Lutheran charity services and you're serving food to the hungry, you have to be a separate 501c3 that has to play by all the same rules as every other 501c3 and separate from the Lutheran Church. Does that make sense? So if your church, your synagogue, your mosque, any house of worship wants to have a charitable purpose, you then had to create a separate 501c3 in order to apply and get any kind of government funding until charitable choice, which allowed a limited number of federal monies and state monies to go to houses of worship that said, oh, we'll help the poor if you allow us to have some of the money. Okay. So that's what started it. And we all bellyached about it. AU was right at the front, AHA bellyached about it, we all bellyached about it, but everyone said, what's the harm? They're already helping people, we should make it easier on them. They always do good, right? Because secular organizations don't, right? We should make it easier on the churches. They're already doing good. Okay, so then Bush expanded that into the faith-based initiative, which, and these are the executive orders. And he originally created 9 federal organizations. We're up to 15 now. And Executive Order 13279 in 2002 is what allowed them to circumvent the anti-discrimination laws. So it wasn't enough that they got the money and they didn't have to have the separate 501c3. This is what allows them to circumvent the anti-religion, the anti-gay, the anti-women, the race. They now can discriminate based on their religious preferences when they hire with your money. And they're doing it. We know of a case in Georgia, this was state money, and that's how we know about it because they brought it under state law. A Catholic organization was running a drug rehabilitation program, and they needed a counselor. This was in a rural county, it was one job, and they needed a counselor. And they only had one really qualified candidate. And it happened to be someone who they went through, it was great. The very last question they asked was, are you Catholic? And the man answered no. And they said, well, what is your religious affiliation? He said, I'm Jewish. They said, sorry, we only hire Catholics. So he sued. And they didn't have anybody else for the job. And he won because the state decided it was more important that they fill the position and they fulfill the contract. But that's not what is under the executive order. Under the executive order for federal money, they don't have to hire that person. In fact, it came to light recently, and there have been hearings on this, that the United Conference of Catholic Bishops, how many of you have heard of them? If you haven't and you want to hear a horror story, just read up on them. What they've done is they've received contracts to help women and children who have been rescued from human trafficking. And often human trafficking includes sexual violence. And so part of the contract included services to help them medically and emotionally recover from that. As part of the within several years of getting that contract, they got it over and over and over again. It came to light after an investigation by a third party, not through Health and Human Services, who should have been administering and double checking what the conference was doing. They were not fulfilling that part of the contract. Sometimes they sublet it to a third party to do it, but most of the time they just weren't fulfilling that part of the contract because under Catholic teachings, those services are not allowed. So you have human trafficking victims who need services based on the sexual violence that they faced, and counseling services and treatment, and they weren't getting it because the provider that was chosen by the federal government didn't feel it was necessary or didn't feel that they should because of their own religious teachings. So when this came to light, it was an outrage, and minor outrage to some people, and victims groups spoke up. And so the next year, the contract was awarded to a secular group who would provide all the services. Well, the Catholic bishops objected because these contracts are worth a lot of money. And they said, we didn't do anything wrong. And Congress held hearings. And they said, what exactly is the problem here if they promise now to always send it to a third party? And make sure. Well, the problem is consistency and making sure that nobody falls through the cracks and that the victims get continuation of services and continuity of services. So that's one of the issues that we're facing. And the fact that Health and Human Services was not checking through, that there isn't that follow-through of the services that they're supposed to make sure that these victims are getting. And if there's one example like that happening, you know there are more. Okay, so where are we now? Well, in 2008, President Obama promised, I'm doing a check on time, that he would not allow discrimination when federal funds were used. He promised this in Zanesville, Ohio when he was on the stump. However, when he unveiled his new revised faith-based office, he did not change it. He appointed a council of really great people, all religious, no non-religious people on his council. They even advised him to do this. They advised him to put the separate 501c3 requirement back in. He has done none of that. And Josh Dubois, who was the first leader of his office, said that complaints about discrimination would be handled on a case-by-case basis. Melissa Rogers now heads that organization, and there have been meetings by the non-theistic community with her. She has promised that there'll be more transparency. We don't have a timeline for that, but at least she's talking to us. Josh Dubois would never talk to the non-theistic community, only when we cornered him at public events. So, which I was very good at doing. As were some others in our community. So I did manage to actually get the president on the record on this for the first time in 2011 at a town hall meeting. I was invited to the town hall by the White House. I sat in a section with Democratic donors. I'm not sure why they put me there. So I put myself in the front row, and it's a town hall. So I knew that he'd be taking questions, and it was about his new economic plan for America. So I wrote my question and I waited, and after he finished his stump speech, he said, I'm gonna now take questions. I'm gonna go girl, boy, girl. So I jumped up and raised my hand, and he looked over to the left, he's left-handed, and he called on me, much to his eternal dismay. And I stood up and I told him I was from Iowa, because he loves Iowa. He won the caucus there, and he got a big smile on his face, and everyone else is smiling, and then I told him I was an atheist, and it just melted right off his face. And you can see it, C-SPAN was recording it, and it's on, you can go find it on YouTube. And if you look behind him, they've always put people behind him, they all smiling too. And so I asked him my question, which was that he promised this in Zanesville, Ohio, to stop the anti-discrimination, and if he was going to do that, why hadn't he, and what would he tell a woman now who couldn't get a job, who had all the requisite skills, and this was when things were still really, really bad in the economy, who had skills, and not only couldn't get a job because of her skills, but was now being turned away because of this anti-discrimination policy. And they then wanted me to sit down, and I wouldn't. They took the microphone away. But I stood standing, and he launched in one of our most well-educated constitutional presidents, one of the best talkers when it comes to dancing around an issue, spent 3.5 minutes trying to figure out how to get around that question. He never really did answer it, and they cut back to me at one point, and I was going, and he said, so not everyone's happy with this, and I can tell you're one of them. I was like, damn right. So anyway, that's where we are with that. Nothing. We're still allowing discrimination. It's not moved. And according and something else is transparency. We don't know how much money is being spent. If you've ever tried to track grant money through the federal budget, it's worse than trying to get someone in North Korea to speak out against their great leader. It is difficult. And it's really hard. So the best that I can come up with is, according to White House tallies, and this has come through Politico and some other news groups, is that nonprofit groups received $15.3 billion in competitive grants in 2007, which was an increase, and of that, $2.2 billion went to faith-based nonprofits. And that has been more than $10.6 billion since the initiative got underway in 2002, and most of that has gone to faith-based groups. And the reason we know that is because there has been a concerted effort to give the money to faith-based groups. If you want to read a really interesting book, I do not know how to pronounce his name, David Kuo. He actually just died last month from a brain tumor. He was part of the initial faith-based train. He created it, helped create it, but then he felt that they were corrupting what was good about faith-based groups, so he wrote a tell-all called Tempting Faith, an Inside Story of Political Seduction. Okay, I'm almost done, I promise. So anyway, and Politico found that during the stimulus plan, the first stimulus program that went through during Obama, the Obama administration pushed $140 million specifically towards houses of worship, new boilers, new roofs, just to help them along. And why do they do this? They do this because it creates, and this is my conspiracy theory, it creates a untraceable way for whoever is in the White House to funnel money to churches who then turn their congregations to whoever's in the White House to vote for them. And if you think about it, are you really going to, if you can get a grant to put on a new roof, to get a new boiler, to fund whatever initiative you're supporting, we're talking lots and lots of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes $1 million grant for your church. Are you going to speak ill of that White House? You're not supposed to, but we've also known that the IRS has not done a single thing to stop preaching from the pulpit, right?
Right.
So when you start thinking about that, they haven't done that. There's now a lawsuit to contest that actual idea to allow preachers to preach from the pulpit. And the ties between religion and the White House have gotten stronger during the Obama White House. And they're doing this, and it's churches that really do work to get out the vote in many rural communities and in many minority communities, which is where a lot of support for Obama came from. Now, I'm all for that. I think that we should do everything we can in our communities to get out the vote, but I think it's very suspicious, especially since in the Hine case, which was decided in 2008, 2007, 2008, that we have no taxpayer standing to challenge how executive money is spent. So this is my actual legitimate conspiracy theory that I think we should all get on board with. I'm going to skip all this because I'm out of time. I hate all of you. Sandy, Superstorm Sandy. There's actually a bill, this is the bill, I pulled it from Thomas, where they actually want to legitimize giving federal aid to houses of worship that were damaged in natural disasters. They should have insurance. And if they don't have insurance, or if they do, their own congregation should pay for it. We should not be funding the restoration of churches. They don't pay property taxes.
Right.
They don't contribute to the tax base of It passed in the House. It's now in the Senate. They are going to take it up before they recess for the year. I encourage you to contact your senators and tell them no. And again, here's the bill. It's HR 592. You can go on thomas.gov. By the way, in my book, it tells you how to do all this. So, but this is a big one, because it won't just be for Sandy, it'll be for the next big catastrophe that comes along. All right, it used to be better. No organization, no religious organization has ever said that they need to be, that they can't be a 501c3, a charitable separate organization in order to do good work. If we had to fill out the paperwork, so do they. It doesn't stop them from helping people. All it does is allow them to discriminate and proselytize to whoever comes through their door. All right, so this is the thing. I'm Moses. I'm telling you to go out and preach the good word. Thank you.